Hello everyone! Welcome back to Old Charles, the channel where we dive deep into the fascinating world of coins, history, and hidden treasures in your pocket change. Today, we're going to talk about a classic British coin, the United Kingdom 10 new pence coin from 1974. We'll explore its history, its design, its collector's value today, and why this coin still attracts numismatists around the world. So, stay tuned till the end because you might be surprised by how much these old coins can be worth depending on their condition. To understand the 1974 10 new pence coin, we first need to step back in time to 1971. This was the year when the United Kingdom officially switched from the old pre-decimal currency system to the new decimal system. Before 1971, Britain used shillings, florins, and pence in a much more complicated way. But with decimalisation, the system became much simpler. 100 new pence made £1 sterling. The 10 new pence coin was introduced as part of this decimalisation process. It replaced the old 2 shillings coin, which had been in circulation since the early 19th century. Interestingly, the 10 new pence and the old 2 shillings were exactly the same size and value, so people could use both interchangeably. The year 1974 was still very close to this historic transition, which makes coins from this period especially meaningful for collectors. They represent not just money, but also a piece of history when the entire nation was adjusting to a brand new currency system. Now let's talk about the design. On the obverse side, that's the front, you'll find the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II. The version used in 1974 was the portrait by Arnold Machin, which shows the young queen wearing the Girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara. This portrait was widely admired and used on British coins from 1968 until 1984. On the reverse side, the back of the coin, you'll see a crowned lion, a symbol of British strength and tradition. This powerful lion design was created by Christopher Ironside, the artist responsible for several iconic British coin designs of the decimal era. Around the lion, the words "New Pence" are inscribed, along with the denomination 10. The coin itself was made from cupronickel, that's 75% copper and 25% nickel, giving it a silver-like appearance and a weight of 11.31 grams. Its diameter was 28.5 millimeters, making it fairly large compared to today's 10 pence coins. The 1974 10 new pence was minted in large quantities for circulation. At the time, it was a common coin used daily across the United Kingdom for shopping, transport, and all kinds of everyday transactions. Because millions were produced, the coin itself is not considered rare in average condition. However, it's still a nostalgic piece, especially for those who lived through the decimalisation period of the early 1970s. Collectors often look for examples in the best condition possible, especially uncirculated or proof strikes, which are much harder to find today. Now let's get to the most important part, the value of the 1974 10 new pence coin. For circulated coins ***, the ones that show clear signs of wear, scratches, or dullness, the value is usually modest, around 10 to 50 pence, basically close to its face value as a collectible. For better condition coins, lightly circulated or with minimal wear, the value can rise to around £1 to £2 depending on the quality. But the real jump in value comes with uncirculated coins or those taken directly from mint sets. A 1974 10 new pence in brilliant uncirculated condition can be valued anywhere between £5 and £15, sometimes more if it is perfectly preserved. If you happen to find a proof version, usually issued in special collector sets, the value can reach even higher, around £20 to £30 depending on the demand among collectors. It's also worth noting that in 1992, the 10 pence coin was downsized to a much smaller version. This means the large-sized coins like the 1974 issue were eventually withdrawn from circulation. That fact alone adds historical charm and collectability to the older, larger coins. Collectors love the 1974 10 new pence not because it's extremely rare, but because it's part of the early decimal series. These coins connect us to a time of change in British monetary history. The design, the size, and the fact that it represents a bygone era make it a must-have in any complete UK decimal collection. Many people in the UK still remember using these larger 10p coins, so there's also a nostalgic factor, especially among older generations who saw them in daily life. So, the United Kingdom 10 new pence coin from 1974 may not make you rich overnight, but it's a beautiful and historically significant coin that carries the story of Britain's currency transformation. In circulated condition, it's worth around its face value, but in uncirculated or proof condition, collectors may pay anywhere from £5 to £30 or even more for pristine examples. If you have one at home, take a closer look at its condition. It might be a small treasure in your coin collection to truly appreciate the 1974 10 new pence coin. We have to step back not just to 1974, but to a much larger story in British currency history. For centuries, Britain used the pre-decimal system. This system was based on pounds, shillings, and pence. 1 pound was equal to 20 shillings, and each shilling was worth 12 pence, making a total of 240 pence in 1 pound. While it worked for many years, it was complicated, especially for younger generations, tourists, and businesses dealing with international trade. By the 20th century, many countries had already moved to decimal systems, where one unit of currency is divided into 100 smaller units, a much easier calculation. Britain knew it would eventually have to modernize. The decision finally came in the 1960s. The British government announced that on February 15, 1971, the country would officially move to a decimal system. This day became known as Decimal Day. It was one of the most important changes in the nation's financial history. Now, how does the 10 new pence coin fit into this? Well, the 10 new pence was introduced in 1968, 3 years before Decimal Day, so that people could get used to the new coins while the old money was still circulating. In fact, the 10 new pence was designed to directly replace the 2 shillings coin, which had been part of British currency since the early 1800s. The old 2 shillings coin and the new 10 new pence coin were exactly the same size, weight, and metal composition. This was deliberate. It meant that people didn't feel too disoriented during the changeover. Shops, machines, and tills didn't have to adjust immediately, and the public had time to grow familiar with the new system. By 1974, just 3 years after Decimal Day, Britain was still very much in the early years of the decimal system. The large 10 new pence coins were common in circulation, and they became a symbol of this modernization of the UK's currency. It's also important to note the global context. The early 1970s were a time of economic change. Britain had just gone through the end of the post-war rationing era, inflation was rising, and the country was adjusting to being part of the European Economic Community, EEC, which it had joined in 1973. The decimal system was seen as a step toward making trade and financial exchange easier with European partners, many of whom already used decimal currencies. The 10 new pence coin of 1974 therefore wasn't just a piece of change in people's pockets, it was part of a much larger shift. It represented modernization, simplification, and Britain's move into a new era of economic life. These coins were made from cupronickel and had the same silver-like look as older British coins, maintaining a sense of tradition while introducing something new. At the same time, the coin carried symbols of strength and heritage, like the crowned lion on the reverse, reminding people that even while the system was changing, the heart of Britain's national identity remained strong. Fast forward to the 1990s, and the story of the large 10p coin takes another turn. In 1992, the Royal Mint decided to reduce the size of the 10 pence coin to a much smaller, lighter version. This meant that the older, larger coins, like the 1974 issue, were gradually withdrawn from circulation. People had to hand them in, and by the late 1990s, they were no longer legal tender. That's why today, when we look at the 1974 10 new pence coin, we're looking at a piece of history that no longer exists in everyday life. It's a coin that links us directly back to Decimal Day, to the big economic changes of the 1970s, and to a Britain that was balancing tradition with modernization. For collectors and historians, the 1974 10 new pence isn't just a coin. It's a time capsule from the early days of decimalization, a reminder of how Britain moved from centuries of tradition into the decimal age. When it comes to coin collecting, condition is everything. The value of your 1974 10 new pence coin depends heavily on how well it has survived over the past 50 years. Let's break this down in detail. Collectors and numismatists use a grading system to describe the condition of coins. Here's a quick overview. These coins are heavily worn, with most of the details faded away. The Queen's portrait may be flat, the lion on the reverse barely visible, and the surface often scratched. These coins usually hold only sentimental or historical value, not much monetary value. In this condition, the main details are visible, but there is significant wear. The Queen's portrait still has a clear outline, but finer features like hair details or facial definition are smoothed out. The crowned lion is still identifiable, but lacks sharpness. These coins might be worth around their face value or just a little more. Coins in this range still show signs of circulation, but much more detail is visible. You can see the Queen's tiara, the facial features, and the lion's mane and crown fairly clearly. The coin will still have scratches and dullness from handling, but it is much more collectible. These might fetch around £1 or £2 EF condition, a coin shows only light wear on the highest points of the design. The fields, background areas, are still relatively smooth and free of heavy scratches. You'll see the Queen's portrait in very clear detail, and the lion design remains bold and sharp. Coins in EF condition are much harder to find in circulation today. These coins look almost perfect, with only the faintest touches of wear on the highest points. The shine, known as the coin's luster, may still be present. Collectors really value coins in this state. These coins are the cream of the crop. They look just as they did when they left the Royal Mint in 1974, with sharp details, mirror-like surfaces, and no signs of circulation. They often come from mint sets that were stored safely away from everyday use. These are the most valuable versions of the 1974 10 new Pence coin. Proof coins are specially made for collectors using polished dies and planchets. They have a stunning, mirror-like finish and frosted details. If you own a proof 1974 10 new Pence, it's a premium item and can fetch higher prices compared to standard issues. Remember, with the 1974 10 new Pence coin, it's not about rarity in numbers, because millions were minted, but about rarity in condition. Finding one in uncirculated or proof state today is much harder than finding a well-worn example. That's why condition is the single biggest factor that determines how much your coin is worth in today's collector market.